What is going on? Thank you for tuning in to the MMA Podcast. Happy October. It is the 1st, and as always, we got a ton to break down. This coming weekend, UFC 192, a big card for the 205ers. We got a championship fight between Daniel Cormier and Alexander Gustafsson. Also, another big fight between Ryan Bader, Rashad Evans. The co-main is going to be Johnny Hendricks versus Tyron Woodley. We're going to break that card down. We're going to talk a little bit about last weekend's UFC Japan card. Big news with Jon Jones. The plea deal is official. He'll be coming back soon. Maybe a return from BJ Penn. We're going to talk it all on this week's The MMA Podcast.
You're listening to the MMA Podcast!
That's right, Lenny Hart. It is the MMA Podcast, and we thank you for tuning in on this beautiful October Thursday night. Like I mentioned in the intro, we got a ton of MMA to break down. And we're trying to make them a little shorter, a little more succinct. You know, we were doing 2.5, 3 hour shows for a while there, and we're trying to get it down to maybe hour and a half. I don't know. We're gonna be a little more concise, break it down without going on too ridiculous of rants. Before we go any further, though, and we start to talk about this UFC Japan card we had last Saturday, I do want to introduce the man in the co-pilot seat. He's on Twitter at Sweet Pappy Jones. You might know his beautiful, sultry voice is the one belonging to a friend of mine, P Money. Pat, what's going on, dude?
Yes, Jake. I'm so fucking stoked to be here with you on this Thursday night. It's a beautiful evening here in Southern California, per usual. And pleasure to link up with you all the way over there in Florida and chat about the upcoming MMA events that we got going on here. Should be a good little event we have this coming Saturday, as you mentioned. Talk a little bit about the UFC Japan card we had, break down the news, all fun stuff.
Yeah, Studio 15 here. This is the fifth city that we've done it from. We were in Gainesville, I think, the first couple months of the show, then in Chicago for 4 or 5 months, then in St. Petersburg for 6 months, then we spent 2 years in Denver, Colorado. Now we're here in Tallahassee, Florida. Thank you for being a part of the ride, whether you tuned in all the way back from the first episode, which I guess the first year or two was myself and the beautiful Chris Lowe on Twitter at C. Lowenstein. Hope to get him back on soon. Love hearing him break down the show, and then a little bit of Ramsey. So a lot of other great folks sprinkled in there. Davey Boy, Ross, Yao, Allen. And I'm sure you will hear a lot of them in the future, but tonight it's just myself and Pat breaking down this UFC Japan card, and let's get straight to it. If you want to hear about the prelims, Google that shit, because like I said, we're trying to make it a shorter, more concise show. The main card, though, let's talk about everything up to the co-main and main event. Mizuto Hirota with a split draw in that road to UFC Japan featherweight final. A little anticlimactic if you watch the show. I actually watched a few episodes of it. You had the veteran in Hirota taking on Teruto Ishihara, and it was an exciting fight. Both guys had their moments. I think I saw more people giving the fight to Ishihara than Hirota, but it's a split draw, 29-28, 28-29, in the last judge seeing it 29-29. You had Diego Brandao getting an early TKO against Katsunori Kikuno. Diego was slipping a little bit there, took a few losses. I think he had back-to-back losses against Dustin Poirier and a quick TKO against Conor McGregor, but now has rallied back. That's now 2 first-round finishes in a row for Diego Brandao against Jimmy Hedges and now Katsunori Kikuno. Takeya Mizugaki was a pretty big favorite against George Roop and gets the judges' nod 29-28. Not much more to say about that one. And Kyoji Horiguchi looked very good against Chico Camus. Camus, not necessarily a guy you hear a lot when you talk about the title picture at 125, but I don't know, man. He's lost 1 in his last 5. He's really lost 2, but 1 was turned into a no contest because of a WE test. Actually, 3 of his last 6. He beat Kyung Ho Kang, beat Yautzin Meza, beat Brad Pickett, lost to Chris Holdsworth, and realized he needed to move down, and he's 1-2. Lost to a very game Henry Cejudo, a guy who's probably at the front of the line for a title shot at 125, and now Kyoji. Camus is really good about fighting up to the level of the guy he's facing, but I don't know. Kyoji did a very good job at dominating the fight, dictating where it took place, and just putting forth a very one-sided game plan, taking it 30-27 across the board. I want to save the co-main event and main event for their own topic there, but Pat, what did you take away from the rest of the card at the Sadayama Super Arena?
Well, I found the event, it had some fights. They were either fight of the night or they were just kind of snoozers. I mean, gosh, I really don't even know where to start with this one. Horiguchi, he did put on a good show against Camus. He's really, I like him as a prospect at 125 pounds. Of course, he already had his shot with Demetrius Johnson, but there's always that potential that he could come back and do a little bit better. He's got a unique style, kind of the karate base for flyweight. Justin Scoggins kind of has the Taekwondo thing going for himself. So you never know. He could match up with Demetrius Johnson in the future. And Chico Camus, he, as you mentioned, I mean, he's really only faltered against the top of competition. He's a decent fighter for either 125 or 135 coming out of Rufus Sport Camp. What was up, though, with Mizugaki just balling like a baby, worse than some of the UFC Brazil cards. I mean, it was comical to me the way he was crying after that Rube fight. That was another one. I was half interested in that one. It was a little bit of decent back and forth, but hard for me to get super excited. Diego Brandao looked amazing, just putting the mad pressure on Kikuno, getting a savage knockout in like 30 seconds, getting a little performance of the night bonus in the process. Just stormed out and looked like a straight beast. He's got some chops on the ground, but he does have some heavy hands as well. And he put on a good showing. Kikuno, he's known as a pretty good striker himself. So it was a solid victory for Brandao there. It was a little bit back and forth. I found this event was just either an amazing fight or just kind of just kind of pedestrian affairs. I don't know. What do you think, Jake?
For which fights? Sorry, I started staring at Twitter and I got lost in a trance.
No, just the general. I mean, it wasn't a super disappointing event, but it wasn't a super good event either. It was quite hit and miss as the fights went on. Some were off the hook. Some were just not that good.
Yeah, I don't want to say I fell asleep for a majority of the main card and had to watch most of the card back on my DVR on Sunday. But that's exactly what happened. I luckily woke up in time for the co-main and main event, but I think I went to bed sometime around the split draw being announced, and kind of woke up right before the Hall fight in a daze, and I rewatched it, and it was all right, but yeah, it was, you had a quick finish by Brandao, and then the Mizugaki Horiguchi fights. I don't know, that kind of threw the brakes on the entire flow of the card. Both of them very predictable, one-sided decision wins. It was 30 minutes of fighting, probably an hour of programming, and it literally put me to sleep. You know what didn't put me to sleep though? Uriah Hall against Gegard Mousasi. It looks like we have a caller before we get into Hall Mousasi. Caller, how are you doing
Just in
tonight?
time.
You know damn well who this is.
What?
Can you hear me loud and clear?
It is Ramses, a.k.a. the Aunt Jimmy Show. He was on last week, and I don't know, Pat and I picked against Hall, taking the heavy Vegas favorite, Gegard Mousasi. Ramses staying true to his tough 17 roots and took the big underdog, Uriah Hall.
This is what I want, alright? I want both of you to say right now, live on the air, that you were wrong and I was right. I demand it right now, in the name of the word on the street.
Oh, man.
Who's gonna go first? Who has the courage left?
Ramses, you know what? I'll step up to the plate. Your boy P Money, he's man enough to admit when he was wrong. And I was wrong. I gotta say, though, I wish you would have told me that the work was in on this one. Why didn't you tell me the work was in?
You know what? The fight was a work. It was a work of art. Alright? And I saw it coming a mile from people. Listen to me. You know the reason Mousasi never makes a facial expression? It's because dead people don't do that. And he's known for a long time that he was a dead man. The day he found out he was going to fight Uriah Hall, he knew that was the day when it became official. All right, and now, and Jake, you know, I forgive you, man. I know you followed Mousasi. You thought he's some sort of god or anything. Or I really don't know what you guys were thinking. Every time someone dies sword in the street, I don't know what the fuck they're thinking. But once again, I am proven right. And you guys are still going to doubt me on the Kelvin Gastelum thing. I know it.
Ramses,
But, say it.
I was wrong, and you were right, but come tough Latin America 2, Matt Brown is going to squish Kelvin Gastelum's face until it looks like hamburger meat.
All right, see, they still doubt. They still doubt, as they say in church. But no, it went exactly like I expected. I was never worried, even in round one when it looked tough for Uriah. Everything looked bleak. I mean, Uriah, you know, he has to break sweat a little bit, kind of get, you know, he was toying with Mousasi. He wanted to know what the best had to offer, and at the end of round one, he knew. I mean, I've even seen people calling Uriah Hall's kick and knee fluke. Well, it wasn't a fluke because I told you guys it was gonna happen.
No such things as flukes in MMA. Ramses, we understand that you're currently you are on the run from federal authorities, and you can't spend too much time on the phone lest they triangulate your position. You have to probably change locations pretty soon just for calling into a show that's being publicly aired. But before you go, can we get your picks on UFC 192 and, of course, any other comments, questions, or concerns before you dip out? I think we have Evans, Bader, Woodley, Hendricks, and Cormier, Gustafsson. Those are the fights the people want to hear the word on the street picks for. And, you know, we know it's a very, very trying time going from spot to spot on the run from the feds. We appreciate you taking the time. Follow him on Twitter, The Ant Jimmy Show. The word on the street, I believe, will be returning soon.
Yeah. Actually, I can tell you, I'm in a fallout shelter close to Houston, where the event will take place on Saturday. Just a few quick tips here. In the prelims, you're gonna have that Sage Northcutt guy everyone's talking about. If you saw the Road to Finding a Fighter or Looking for a Fight show, whatever, on YouTube, Dana White Looking for a Fighter, whatever. You know, I guess the Ultimate Fighter has no point now. But anyway, Sage Northcutt fight is going to be a work. He's going to win. They're going to fix the fight for him. Nice. Rashad Evans. Who's he fighting? Bader? Yeah, I don't even know if he has it. I don't even know if he has enough steam. Yeah, it's kind of a gimme. I mean, even the UFC doesn't know if Rashad Evans is going to retire or not. If he loses, he'll retire.
A funny fact: we should see Evans fight here, which means that my favorite weird stat of UFC 167, we had a main and co-main event: GSP, Hendricks, Evans, Sonnen, and of those 4 fighters, only one fighter has fought since, and Johnny, who will coincidentally be on the co-main event. But this is Rashad Evans' first fight since Chael and GSP both most recently fought. This is a huge layoff. This is a nearly 2-year-long layoff, and I'm curious if ring rust is going to factor in.
If he loses, he'll retire. If he wins, it's because it's a gimme fight. I mean, Ryan Bader, come on. Who else is going to fight?
What do you think of this? The 205 title.
I wouldn't be. This one's a coin flip. I wouldn't be surprised if Gus isn't. Whatever his name is, if Gus takes it. But I believe the big. I mean,
will the fight be worked to build up the DC Jones rematch?
Well, see, there's money in both outcomes.
Yeah.
So that's why it's a coin flip. Either way,
the UFC Jones' closest fight. Yeah.
Yeah. So as far as that goes, coin flip. I can't call that one right now. Even my spies can't get that one.
What do you think of this fancy boy gimmick, Sage Northcutt? Should I cue up the music?
Do it, man. Do it. I got time for that.
I call him out and he covers his mouth like a little fancy boy. I mean, what is that?
They call me fancy boy. You're a love man. Just really walk it.
Yep, he's a dandy. He's a real fancy boy.
My boy, zigzag.
Yeah, they gotta ban that hair glue that he's using to make it all spiky or whatever. That's that could. I mean, if one of those spikes lands in your eye, your career's done, man. You're Bisbing status, dude. But he'll win. It's gonna be a complete work. Watch out for that. And Jessica I's gonna win because she smokes marijuana. And that's all I got. They're tracing me right now, so I got to sign off, gentlemen. Great podcast.
Thank you for calling in.
Yeah, man. You guys stay alive.
Always a pleasure, Ramses.
Later, buddy.
See you later, P-Money. Later, Jake. I'm out. Word on the street.
That was a friend of ours, Ramses. He's in a bunker located, I guess he said, in Texas. somewhere, gave us
Parts
a
unknown.
litany of thoughts. Yeah, he talked about Sage Northcutt's haircut, which I like to call the Northcut. You know, all of his hair is sticking up. It's the Northcut.
Very nice, very nice.
I guess let's get back to Hall versus Mousasi. We were wrong. Ramses was right. Hall busted out a crazy jumping back kick to the body that made Gegard double over, followed it up with a flying knee and punches with 25 seconds left in the second round. Uriah Hall, man, and his next fight is going to be against another contender at 185. Very quick turnaround. He'll be fighting Robert Whitaker in about a month and a half at UFC 193, replacing the injured Michael Bisping. What did you think about this fight? And I mean, obviously now we have to look at Uriah Hall's Uriah Hall's position at 185, because it seems like if you beat Gegard, you're an elite fighter, and this makes Uriah Hall's stock at 185 skyrocket. I mean, in his entire career, going back to 2006, so the last decade, Gegard has only lost to Mo Lawal, who's a contender at 205 in Bellator, and that was still like 5 years ago. And since joining the UFC in 2013, the guy's 4-3. The three people he's lost to: Lyoto Machida, top guy at 185; Jacare Souza, top guy at 185; and now Uriah Hall. So Uriah Hall looked amazing. If he can get past this test in Robert Whitaker, he's probably looking at a top 5. I mean, definitely a top 10, but we're talking only a few fights away from a title shot if he's able to get past Robert Whitaker at UFC 193 next month. What did you think of the Mousasi fight, though?
Jake, I really wish our boy Ramses wasn't on the run right now, because I just need to know this man. He's got some takes. He's got some people on the inside. And, I mean, okay, there was so much going on with this fight. First of all, Mousasi was looking more ripped for this fight than I recall him looking in a long time / potentially ever. And the UFC recently, with their upped anti-doping policies and things like that, I found it just very curious. The way he beasted on Uriah Hall in the first round, just took him down, had a great trip, dominated him on the ground, pretty much just lit him up everywhere that fight went. That whole first round was just Gegard the entire time. And then the second round, Uriah Hall, 30 seconds in, lands a jumping, spinning back kick. I believe that landed on the jaw. I was trying to find a better clip, but I want to say that was a jumping, spinning back kick, heel to jaw, followed up with a flying knee to the jaw. And also followed up with a flurry of ground and pound.
Yeah, I think I misspoke. It was a jaw strike. I was thinking of another fight maybe where he landed a nice body spinning side kick. But yeah, I think you're right. It hit him right on the old chin.
Yeah, it was the craziest combination, and it just makes me wonder, my goodness, was this a work? I mean, Mousasi, again, he looked jacked to the gills like I don't ever remember him looking before. And he dominated the first round. And then Uriah Hall comes out, finishes him with this crazy combo, followed up with some ground and pound. And in the post-fight interview, Uriah Hall was saying, oh, you know, I was timing him. I noticed how he flinched when I would do this and that. So that's how I timed it. I'm like, okay, so you're able to be the first person to knock out Gegard Mousasi, but you lose a split decision to Rafael Natal. You can't time Rafael Natal and find an opening with his ass in the striking. I found it very interesting. This was a wrestling style work. They're trying to put Uriah Hall over again. You know, like I was saying before, I believe it was before the event when we were breaking it down, the previous podcast, when we had Ramses on breaking it all down. Uriah Hall just has not looked the same since he knocked out that can on the Ultimate Fighter, and they needed to set up another work to put him over, and I feel that this was it. And man, I don't know. It was. I wish I would have listened to my boy Ramses and put a couple bucks on old Uriah Hall, because he was a big underdog in Vegas. That would have been a nice little plus 300 come up there. But man, like I said, I wish I would have known it was a work. If the boy Ramses would have told us that was just straight fixed up to go down the way it was, I certainly would have put a couple bucks on that, because that was just. It was unbelievably crazy, that combo. It was just too crazy for me to believe. I don't know. It was fantastic to watch, but just unrealistically good.
What do you think about Hall at 185?
I don't know. That's the thing. I think he would get murdered by a Yoel Romero. It'd be interesting to see him fight a Luke Rockhold. He was knocked out by Chris Weidman in one of his very first fights, but also it was one of Chris Weidman's very first fights. So there you go. Weidman's, well, we see what he's been doing with his career. I don't think he hangs with the top of the division. I can see him being in the top 10. I mean, obviously he just murdered Gegard Mousasi in a fantastic work. So he's got to end up in the top 10 somewhere, but once he starts getting to the top, I think he's going to start to falter.
Yeah, and we'll see where that ceiling is. You know, people have said for a while that knock on Uriah, it's not his physicality at all, it's his mindset. I've quoted him a million times on it, but our boy Jay at the J Jeans, the guy who went to the Grand Canyon with me and Pat back at UFC 189, he has a really funny metaphor for Uriah Hall, and he's like a video game character with 100 at every stat, but the person who's playing the game just doesn't know how to play. It's just, you know, the physicality's there, but the question mark has always been his mental game, and he looked amazing against a very cerebral fighter against Gegard. I think he can get into the top 5 once he starts fighting guys like Yoel, Jacare, Luke Rockhold, Lyoto. We will see, and I'll be very, very interested if he can get past Robert Whitaker to see who he gets after that. Maybe, you know, a Tim Kennedy. I mean, I think Vitor would be an awesome match, because I think Hall can beat post-TRT Vitor easy. A fight against Robert Whitaker, I will be taking Uriah Hall there. Let's move on to the main event real quick. Barnett versus Nelson. I don't think it has near the title implication as a Hall Gegard, because I think both guys are they're at the tail end of their careers, like a lot of current heavyweights. This moves Barnett up to 6. It moves Roy Nelson down to 12. Roy, once again, just showing that once he starts getting close to that top 5, he just doesn't have what it takes. Barnett now, rattling off the top 10, we got Verdum the champ, then Kane Jr., Stipe, Arlovsky, Brown, Barnett, Rothwell, Hunt, Overeem, and then Frank Mir. Barnett, I don't know, he got super fucked up by Travis Brown, who unloaded those crazy elbows to the back of Josh's head. He's also taken losses to DC. Honestly, though, aside from those 2 losses, I think the guy's got a lot of wins on his record. Maybe, you know, Arlovsky maybe currently a little bit in front of him as far as getting a title contendership fight. I don't know, maybe Josh Barnett versus Stipe? That would be a fun-ass fight. Barnett against Rothwell? That would be super fun, too. See, you know, what happens there. But Nelson, I think this is, I don't know, it's what we all expected. You know, Roy is an excellent gatekeeper. You know, he'll beat your Dave Hermans, your Matt Mitriones, your Chet Congos, But when you put him up against a Stipe, a Cormier, a Hunt, a Reem, a Barnett, he's lost 5 of his last 6 now. So I think next for him, the UFC gives him a win because guy can only lose so much. What did you think?
Jake, you had alluded earlier in the program to having maybe nodded off a little bit during the broadcast for the UFC Japan fight night. And I must say, this was the point in the program where I nodded off during the main event. I think maybe some point during like the 3rd round, I witnessed the entire fight, but I was doing the head bob thing. I like to call it the bobblehead, and it was just, I don't know if it was just the card itself, but it seemed to drag on. And as you mentioned, it was kind of, we pictured the fight going the way that it did. Although I was hoping for perhaps a late round submission from Josh Barnett, but lots of clinch work, and it was fairly entertaining from what I recall, but just, I don't know if it was the event itself not being the most exciting. And then I personally don't really like watching heavyweights fight for 25 minutes because they get fat and out of breath, and it's not the most exciting for me personally. But I don't know. Josh Barnett, I'm interested to see what they do with him in the future.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I don't know. He hasn't really fought that often, so we'll see how long he takes off between fights next. Because he took almost 2 years off between his last fight at UFC 168 and now. So I don't know. The guy seems to like to do a lot of things on the side, whether it's pro wrestling, Metamoris. We will see what happens there. Let's move on. We'll get past UFC Japan and get to the news. All right, 2 big news topics I want to talk about. First of all, the Jon Jones thing. I could rant all day about the Jon Jones thing. First of all, 2 weeks ago on the show, your boy was here saying that we're going to have some major news about Jon Jones come out on fight week, and it's going to be news that very much speeds up his return and makes it imminent that he will be rematching the winner of Daniel Cormier versus Alexander Gustafsson. So I hate to toot my own horn here, but this is exactly what you saw. Jon Jones signs a plea deal with the chicky hit. He won't do any jail time. The UFC is going to, quote, look through the plea deal to decide what to do with Jon. And it's funny they say that, even if the plea deal said he murdered 5 people. As long as he's not going to jail, there's nothing the plea deal could include that's not going to want the UFC to bring him back. Because, I mean, the UFC is a little low on star power. You have a lot of champions right now in the UFC, who are just not drawing, period. Mighty Mouse. You have Ronda Rousey, who Rousey and Conor are probably your top drawing stars, but let's be honest, UFC 193 in Australia, they're not selling tickets, and a big part of that is because Rousey and Jędrzejczyk, both the champions defending their belts on that card, they're both 15 to 20 to 1 favorites. I mean, both of these fights are going to be just squashings. So you have Rousey and Conor, the only 2 people who are drawing fights. Aldo can't draw a fight. We don't know about Dos Anjos yet, but chances are no. Dillashaw isn't drawing. Weidman somehow, I mean, he's nowhere close to drawing the amount of interest to his fights that a guy like Anderson Silva did. Cormier, nope. Verdum, obviously nope. Lawler, I mean, shit, Lawler is the guy who, if you really look at it, who should be drawing fights. It's him, but he just doesn't, man. It takes that really to get outside the nucleus of hardcore MMA fans. You have to have that personality like a Conor or a Ronda to draw you in. And Jones might not have that level of personality, but the story went mainstream, and people are interested in the story. Jones, probably the biggest heel in the UFC. I mean, I hate to use pro wrestling vernacular, but that's exactly what it is. It's promotion, and Jon Jones is a heel. So he's going to come back, told you so, and probably fight the winner of DC Gus. But it's sad he had a prior DUI crash. This is a set. Nobody else. It shows you how much the U.S. legal system is driven by money. And yeah, he paid off the pregnant girl he hit and made it so she wouldn't press charges. But I think the real big picture, the real shitty thing about this is that I'm not trying to hate on Jon Jones, which Jones and I have had a back and forth on Twitter where he tried to, I guess, dog me, whatever. I don't hate Jones at all. He might hate me, but I don't hate him. And I think he's very important for the sport, and he's like the best probably the best fighter I've ever watched. And probably there's a likelihood of him retiring as the greatest of all time. I mean, God, you look at who he's beaten and how he's beaten them. Jon Jones should have been punished more, and I guess it's an opinion, but it feels close to fact in that this is his second offense. He was drunk, he hit a pregnant chick, runs away to hide some shit, comes back, runs away again, leaves a pregnant woman there with a broken arm. An off-duty cop identifies Jones just running around being a fucking sketch ass. And he's gotten in a DUI wreck before. There's no way, if Jon Jones didn't have Jon Jones money, that he wouldn't have gotten some sort of penalty harsher than what he got, which was less than a slap on the wrist. It's sad if there's a third event and say someone gets killed. I mean, shit, do you bring action against the court for failing to bring punitive damages against a guy who's obviously showed a history of that behavior? You know, selfishly, I'm glad we're not going to miss any more time from Jones, because as a fan of the sport, I want to see him fight as many times as possible. You know, I like seeing fighters, even if they're pieces of shit. I love seeing that excellence and that performance. I mean, Floyd Mayweather is a garbage human being, but I love seeing what he's able to achieve. It's inspirational. I'm glad Jones is coming back, but I think big picture, it's just another reminder how transparently, I don't know if corrupt is the right word, but how kind of fucked up our system is. But yeah, like I said a couple weeks ago, that's the big news on Jones, and he will probably be rematching the winner of DC, maybe his biggest arch rival as far as shit talking goes, and Alexander Gustafsson, who gave him his closest fight ever. So both are very compelling storylines, and if Jones doesn't fight the winner of this, I would be shocked. Pat?
Yeah, same here. I think Jones is clearly being lined up for that fight. Dana White has stated previously that when Jones comes back, he's coming back for the title fight. I agree with you completely 100% on what you mentioned about Jon Jones' legal status. I myself had mentioned previously that I figured, I mean, he wasn't going to get any jail time. I thought there would actually be fines or fees, something along those lines. I was actually wrong. He didn't even have any fines or fees to pay. All he has to do is make some public appearances and do some public speaking gigs. It's pretty crazy. As you mentioned, I mean, his first DUI, he totaled his Bentley into a telephone pole with 2 female occupants in his vehicle. And then in his second DUI, hits a pregnant lady, breaks her arm, flees the scene twice. I mean, it's crazy, and delivers just a cookie cutter apology. I personally I'm not one that will watch someone like that fight. Floyd Mayweather, I don't watch his fights. I don't find him entertaining as a boxer, and I don't really care for him as a person. I mean, him or Pacquiao, really, if we're going to be honest. Pacquiao's not a saint himself, but that's a whole nother story here. But Jon Jones, I don't really care to see him fight. He was the most dominant champion that the UFC's ever seen, arguably. But it's just frustrating to see the legal system work the way that it does. Because similarly to Floyd Mayweather, Jon Jones, he's not receiving the kind of punishment that Jake, you or I would receive in similar circumstances. We would be having the book thrown at us. Absolutely. We would be seeing jail time to some degree. Floyd Mayweather, with one of his more recent convictions, he was essentially allowed to schedule his own jail time and say, oh, this is when I want to go to jail. And, and Las Vegas was just like, oh, hey, this is, what's good for the economy. Period, point blank. Las Vegas is going to get $100 million if we follow the schedule and do this. So that's what we're going to do. It's just so transparently obvious that it's just all about the money. Hopefully Jon Jones turns his life around and, starts being more responsible. And, hopefully if he does, maybe someday I'll enjoy to watch his fights. But he just comes across as a disingenuous person anyhow. And I don't care for him personally. So, yeah, it's a shame to see him get the slap on the wrist treatment, but that's how it goes in the US of A.
Yep, and like I said, we'll probably see him back to fight the winner of this weekend's main event. Other news that I thought was interesting enough to talk about: BJ Penn with some crazy tough words about Nik Lentz and even more so Mike Dolce. Did you see this this wild interview on UFC Tonight?
Yeah, I did. Yeah, that was some crazy stuff coming from BJ.
Yeah, I have the quote here, thanks to UFC on Fox, UFC Tonight.
Division champion, Jiu-Jitsu world champion, UFC Hall of Famer, fought in 5 different weight classes.
Fast forward here
do this. Bring him down to 1145, and it sounds like...
Okay, so I gotta go back a few seconds. Sorry for not having it ready.
I mean, Mike Dolce wants to see all these stuff. I don't train, I don't this and that. Let's do this. Bring him down to 145, and it sounds like I would come
Mike
up for
Dolce,
that.
what's the problem?
Not just him. You were talking about me coming out of retirement. Some things were said and this and that, and got me heated.
So he was kind of blaming your weight cut on you. He wasn't taking responsibility for it at the time, right?
I was there. He was there to work for 20 days. I paid him $1,000 a day. I'm not here to talk about that again, but I'm just sick and tired of hearing it, so many times. And
so, BJ, are you saying you're going to come back at 145? And why at 145?
145, let's do this. That was my last fight. It didn't go well. I had a very bad showing. And, I'm ready. I'm ready for something like that. I've been hanging out. I haven't stepped in the gym for 2 years, but,
So Nik Lentz aside...
So he said before this, I'm sick and tired of hearing about Mike Dolce. I'll put a challenge out right now. You go get Nik Lentz, your boy, bring him down to 145, and I'll run right through him in 1 round, and then I'll find you in the back and smash you. BJ Penn, as I'm sure a lot of maybe long time listeners know, because it's been a while since he's fought. It's my favorite fighter of all time. I don't know how I feel about this. I just, out of nostalgia, I love hearing there's a chance he might come back, but then when he finishes it with a sentence like, I haven't been in the gym for 1 or 2 years, it sounds like he's already making excuses. Nik Lentz, with an almost comical reply, posts on Instagram, quote, "I don't even and have not worked with Dulce for quite some time, so fighting with me will have nothing to do with Dulce. But for the record, fuck you, BJ. You talk too much now. You used to be about actions, but now, like the spoiled little rich kid you are, all you do is talk. I'll gladly fight you anytime, so get your mommy and daddy to paint you some plans." I don't know if that was a misspelling. "To paint you some plans, fly Hawaii out to Vegas, give little baby Penn what he wants, and come out of retirement. This time, I'll make sure to retire you properly. Hashtag bring Penn back." So Lentz not mincing words after being called out by Penn. This is so bizarre, this news. I don't know if, man, you know, yes, Penn did lose to one of the best at 145 in Edgar, but if he hasn't been in the gym for a couple of years, Nik Lentz, I don't know, is the guy to be fucking around about. Lentz is one of the most underrated fighters in the UFC. Pardon me, what do you make of all this craziness?
Craziness is the perfect segue for this interview and BJ Penn. I mean, the one time he does fight at 145 against Frankie Edgar, that was just insane. He didn't even look like he was there to fight. I don't think he had enough water for his vital organs to work properly. He just was an absolute shell of himself. He didn't even sound like the same person. I mean, just listening to the interview, I'm like, is this friggin' Takeya Mizugaki speaking? Sounds Japanese almost. I mean, calling out Nik Lentz for no reason. Nik Lentz looking the way that BJ Penn looked at 145, I think Nik Lentz would have a good chance of smashing him. I mean, BJ Penn looked so sad in the third Edgar fight. I mean, there was no reason for that fight to have even been taking place in the first place, let alone in 145 pounds or at any weight class. There was just no need for it in my book. But that was just such a sad showing. And then when he says, "I haven't been in the gym for a couple years," and I'm like, well, wait a second, that third Frankie Edgar fight, that wasn't that long ago. Were you even in the gym for that? Were you just cutting weight, like not training? Like, man, BJ, I mean, I always held him in high esteem as well. Just the things he's accomplished in the UFC. He's been around since, I mean, the very early days, not the beginning, but I mean, dang, he's been around for a long time in the sport and has done a lot for the sport. But there's no need for him to come back, especially at 145 pounds. And again, really any weight class. I don't want to say that the sport has passed him by, but the sport has passed him by. I'm sure it's tough for him to admit, but there's no reason to go back in there and to just get destroyed by pretty much anybody unless they give him some complete bum in his return.
Yeah, I don't know. You know, it's all mystifying. The fact it was on UFC tonight. I guess this wasn't just him randomly tweeting. This was at least a little bit planned out. So I don't know. You know, he sort of piped up recently and said if they did a UFC event in Hawaii, then he'd come out of retirement. But yeah, we'll see how that progresses. And as a Penn fan, I am cautiously optimistic about his return because I would love to see him just finish with a win. But man, if he hasn't been in the gym, I don't know how well that bodes for Penn fans like myself. I know you have a hard out not too long, Pat, so let's jump straight into UFC 192 unless there are any more news stories you want to break down. I think we touched on Penn, Jones. Those seem to be the big stories of the week. Rumble got a Bentley, a couple minor fight announcements. There's going to be a big UFC lawsuit discovery, which will probably end up in the airing of a lot of private UFC financial information, so that'll be very interesting. See really what the scope is as far as the small percentage of the pie that fighters are actually making. I guess I'm down to move on to UFC 192 if you're ready.
Yeah, let's break down the big show.
Yeah, the prelims, honestly, if you want to listen to someone break down every single fight, listen to Luca Fiori's show, the MMA Oddscast. That guy knows more MMA than probably anyone I've ever heard. I mean, the dude is an expert MMA picker, so if you are into betting Vegas, I would highly suggest you subscribe to his betting service too, and he'll break down every single fight on every single UFC card. So go and check him out. Just a couple fights that stand out. The Fight Pass, you have Derek Lewis taking on Victor Pesta, Chris Carriasso versus Tony Pettis' little brother, Sergio, moving back down to 25. UFC debut of Sage Northcutt. Two up-and-coming 55ers in Adriano Martins versus Islam Makhachev, who I think had a really impressive UFC debut win against Leo Kuntz at UFC 187 not too long ago. Prelims on Fox Sports 1, Rose Namajunas. She fought for that inaugural women's strawweight title back about a year ago, hasn't fought since, making a return against a tough alumni from the same season, Angela Hill. Alan Jouban taking on Albert Tumanov. Joe Benavidez, a big favorite over Ali Bagatinov, two guys who've gotten cracks at the champ and lost. And Yair Rodriguez taking on Dan Hooker. Main card, Jessica Ai versus Juliana Pena. You know, we're seeing a lot of people make returns from a long time off, whether it's Rashad Evans, Josh Barnett last week. Juliana Pena has not fought, she fought once since winning that Tough 18 title 2 years ago. She fought this past April and won via first round TKO, and she'll be taking on Jessica Ai. I actually the underdog there at plus 210, Pena minus 250 favorite, which is a pretty surprising line. And we have Sean Jordan, an underdog to Ruslan Magomedov. What stands out there to you out of all of those fights? And are you also shocked that Ai is a pretty big dog in Vegas, plus 200 to a pretty untested Juliana Pena? I gotta say, she hasn't beaten anybody of note in her career, and I guess they're giving her a lot of credit for the Tough title. In the Tough house, the wins weren't official, but she who did she beat? She beat Shayna Baszler, bum. Sarah Morris, bum. Jessica Rakoczy, bum. Man, I don't know. I think to call her that much of a favorite over Jessica Ai is crazy.
Yeah, I would be inclined to agree. I'm actually surprised. This is the first time hearing of those lines, and that's really surprising. I wouldn't mind putting a couple bucks on Evil Eye. I suppose the theory is that Pena has better grappling, and I mean, of course, grappling goes a long way. Speaking of MMA betting, man, grappling is definitely one of the main factors you want to look at. But really, as I was looking over this whole card, this is a pretty dang good card. As you mentioned, I mean, Yair Rodriguez versus Daniel Hooker, some good featherweight prospects. Joseph Benavidez versus Bagatinov, some of the top-tier flyweight competitors. Alan Jouban versus Albert Tumanov, again, some good prospects this time in the welterweight division. Namajunas, the much-hyped talent versus Angela Hill, also a much-hyped talent. Some good strawweight action there. It should be good to see how these two young ladies get along in the octagon. Adriano Martins, he's a solid competitor, whatever weight class he's fighting at. As you mentioned, his opponent, Islam Makhachev, did have a really good debut there. And that's going to be a good fight. I mean, really, this whole card is looking pretty solid. I'm glad to see Sergio Pettis taking on Chris Carriasso at flyweight. Pettis, I don't know why he was at bantamweight in the UFC to begin with. I want to say no. His last fight with Matt Hobart was at the bantamweight division, if I recall correctly. it'll be good to see how he gets on at flyweight. Derek Lewis versus Victor Pesta, good heavyweight clash there. I mean, really top to bottom from the Fight Pass prelims on. Some decent names here on this card. It should really be a good pay-per-view. I'm liking all the action there. Sean Jordan, he's always good. The former LSU football player, he's got some good hands, and he's got the low center of gravity. Has some good grappling work, considering he was not an NCAA wrestler. He was an NCAA football player, NCAA Division I football champion with the LSU Tigers at that. So he does have some good athletic credentials there, in spite of not being a combat sport. Really a solid card there, I'd say.
So are we still a hard out with you in a minute or two, or can we milk another 10 out of you?
We could probably milk another 10.
I love milking P money here on the MMA podcast. No homo.
Oh, the fans do too.
Let's get to those top 3 fights. Rashad Evans coming back after nearly 2 years off, taking on Ryan Bader. Evans a slight favorite. Another line I'm kind of surprised at. I thought we would see just about even odds here. Ryan Bader, I mean, he arguably should have gotten a title shot over Alex Gus. I mean, you look at his record, and he's won 4 straight against Anthony Perosh, Rafael Cavalcante, OSP, and Phil Davis. And what is Rashad Evans going to look like after that much time out? That's really the big question here, I'm not going to be shocked with either guy winning. Bader has just been sharpening that sword a lot more often. In the time that Evans has been out, that's the same time Bader has gotten these 4 wins, getting better. Mentally, Bader has gone into a lot of high-profile matchups and just kind of seemed not ready. Whether Jones, Ortiz, Machida, Teixeira, all finishes in the first or second round where he seemed kind of mentally not ready for it. But as far as really breaking down the style matchup, do I see either guy getting a finish? No, I don't. I don't see Rashad Evans still having that ability to finish a fight, especially against a guy who's tough to finish like Bader. I don't see Bader finishing the fight either. So I think this fight goes to a decision, and as far as who I think can outgrind the other, I think that's Ryan Bader. So I'm picking another upset here. I'm going to take Ryan Bader winning maybe a split decision. I think it's going to be 29-28. I think I would be surprised if either guy won a very one-sided decision. So maybe we see a split to Ryan Bader, getting very specific here. But what are you seeing in Bader Evans?
That's a very bold choice there, Jake, going out on the limb with Bader. I do see this one being a closer fight, mostly just because of the Evans layoff there. But for me, this is like Rashad Evans. It's like riding a bike. You don't really forget. And Rashad Evans was one of the masters putting the striking and wrestling together. He didn't start out that way, but over time, he was able to put that together so fluidly. To me, the only question here is, are we going to see the Rashad Evans that decimated Chael Sonnen in the first round, or are we going to see the Rashad Evans that played patty cake with Rogerio Nogueira? Because at this point in the game, I think Ryan Bader may be able to out-patty cake him. If Ryan Bader has enough ring IQ to employ that kind of game plan, and if Rashad Evans is content to play that kind of game with him. However, I feel that if Rashad is healthy enough to get back in the cage, it's been a long time since he's been in there. I think he's going to be ready to go out on his shield, as they say. I hate to be cliche there, but he's been with the Black Zillions for some time. I think he's been putting the striking and takedowns together even better than before. I mean, he really put it together quite nicely against Chael. I don't think he'll be able to get the takedowns quite as easily as he was able to, but I think he'll be able to put his hands on Ryan Bader, and I think he very well might be able to sleep him. And as a matter of fact, I think I'm going to have to go with Rashad by first round knockout.
Taking Rashad, first round KO. Yeah, if, we've seen guys like Dom Cruz take a lot of time off and just come back roaring, like Juliana Pena, too, fighting on the same card. His last win, a first round finish over Chael, so we'll see what he's able to do. Co-main event, you have Johnny Hendricks. Man, he's been the last 3 years, he's been, I think, pretty consistently a top 3 welterweight. He hasn't really lost at all except for title fights, I believe. Let me check his record here. Yeah, he's not lost since that Rick Story lost in 2010. 8-2, and honestly, both of those losses, I think he won. He's 1-2 in title fights. And personally, I scored all 3 of those fights to Johnny. I think he beat GSP at 167, where they gave it to GSP in a controversial split. I think everyone thought he beat Robbie at 171. And at UFC 181, even though I wasn't that mad about it, because Robbie did put on a show in the 5th round, if I'm being really objective here, Johnny won that fight. Johnny won all 3 of those fights. So in my eyes, he hasn't lost since that Rick Story loss in 2010. I think Johnny beats everyone in the division. I think he beats Rory. I think he beats Robbie. I think he beats GSP if GSP wants to come back. I think Johnny, he has that maybe the most dangerous combination you can have as a fighter, and he is a world elite level wrestler, both offensively and defensively, and the guy can put you down with one left hook. I think Woodley's very good. He's still young. The guy has a hell of a career going. I think he's 33, but still, I mean, he's got at least another 5 years left in the gas tank. Johnny, he was looking, especially in that last Lawler fight, where having trouble cutting weight, the gas tank getting low at the end of the fights against Matt Brown earlier this year. He looked like he's gotten the workouts and his weight and the gas tank in checked. I think Johnny can go 3 hard rounds, and on the flip side, Woodley has KO power too, but Johnny's got an iron chin. I think Johnny just outworks Woodley here, and we see either another signature first round left hook KO or a 30-27 decision to Big Rig.
Jake, I agree with you, especially on Johnny Hendricks winning those 2 fights that he allegedly lost. If you go back and look at his record, it shows him losing those 2 fights, the one to GSP and the one to Robbie Lawler. He did not lose those fights. How the judges gave them to his opponent in either of those, I don't know how that worked out. But, however, one fight that Johnny Hendricks has won, or if you go back and look at his record, it says that he won since the Rick Story fight, that if I'm being 100% honest, he probably didn't win. It was his fight with Josh Koscheck. Josh Koscheck cut from a very similar cloth to Johnny Hendricks, also a NCAA D1 champion, if I'm not mistaken, and also one of those guys that came over from the wrestling background and learned how to strike, learned how to put everything together, albeit not on the same level as Hendricks. Koscheck obviously never got that title. But if you go back and watch that fight, I believe that Koscheck won. And we saw what Tyron Woodley did in his fight with Josh Koscheck, and which was just annihilated him in the first round. Now, again, if you go back and you do the paper matchup and you look at Hendricks versus Woodley on paper, Hendricks should smoke Woodley. But we all know that every now and then that's just not how it works out. You can't always look at just on paper and say this is how the fight's going to go. He's, oh, Nate Marquardt knocked out Tyron Woodley. So, what's Johnny Hendricks going to do? But styles make fights, and Tyron Woodley has a similar style to Josh Koscheck. He's got a good amount of power as well. He's got good power. He's got some pretty good grappling in his own right. So this is not going to be an easy fight for Johnny Hendricks. I do think Hendricks is going to win. I think it's going to be a real close one. He does have the ability to get the knockout. I mean, if it's going to end in a knockout, obviously, it probably won't be that close, but I do think it has the potential to go to a decision. Woodley is not a pushover by any means, but I do think Hendricks is going to take this one, and that, like you, Jake, I think Hendricks is just one of, if not the top 170-pounder currently in the UFC.
Yeah, and we'll see how that plays out Saturday. The main event, Cormier Gus. I know you want to dip out, so I'll let you break it down first, and then when you're done, you can give them your Twitter and get the hell out of here. I really appreciate the time. But a fight for the 205 belt. Is it the legit 205 belt? A lot of people are calling it a paper title because Jones is really the best fighter at 205. So yeah, how do you see the main event going between Cormier and Gus? And do you think it's an actual title fight, or should this not even be for a belt because Jones is the best out there?
Man, that's a tough one right there. See, I feel like if Gus were to win, I would be more accepting of him as the champion, just because, like we were talking about with Johnny Hendricks, I feel that Gustafsson should have gotten the decision against Jon Jones. I really do. I really don't think he was hurt or in trouble at any point in that fight. I think a lot of that stuff was blown out of proportion, and Gustafsson obviously landed the stronger, more significant shots, did better in the grappling department. By my measure, he won that fight in every way you could look at it. So, having said that, I feel he should have beaten Jon Jones that night. He should have gotten the decision. So, if he beats Cormier, I would be more eager to recognize him as a legitimate champion. Of course, I would like to see him then avenge his loss to Anthony Johnson, because, I mean, there's no disputing that. He was knocked the fuck out fairly bad. This fight, though, Daniel Cormier, I mean, he didn't put up the kind of fight that Gustafsson did against Jon Jones. He was handled pretty thoroughly. And DC, this is kind of like the who's number 2 fight for me. If DC beats Gustafsson, he clearly cements himself as number 2 at the light heavyweight division, aside from Jon Jones, just because he choked out the man who knocked out Gustafsson. If he can beat Gustafsson himself, and anybody else who could work their way up to his level after that point, I feel fairly confident that he would work. So this is an interesting fight. I don't know how much value I really put on the title here. I feel like Jon Jones is going to come out. I mean, Gustafsson has not dealt well with wrestling in the past. And Daniel Cormier has wrestling to the kind of level that Alexander Gustafsson hasn't faced before. And he's also got that dangerous knockout power. I feel this could end very quickly in Cormier's favor. However, with Gustafsson, he does have the height and reach advantage that does give him the ability to create a lot of leverage, like Jon Jones was able to, and to potentially stop some of those takedowns. Gustafsson grappling has been improving, so there is that possibility there. And he has been liking those knees more, as we saw with his knockout over Jimmy Manuwa in his bounce-back fight after his loss to Jon Jones. So those knees are going to be there all day long against Cormier. However, he's going to have to worry about the takedown threat in going with those. But he's got some crisp boxing. He fights long. Man, it's going to be an interesting one. I think the smart money is on Cormier here, but this is another one where you can't count Gustafsson out. Styles makes fights, and Gustafsson, if he employs a real smart, if he gets his footwork down real good, if he employs a smart game plan, he's got a shot here.
you know, you look at that first minute Gus had with Rumble before he got dropped, and Gus was boxing real well, sticking and moving, keeping Rumble at bay. Pardon me. If he's able to do that to DC, it'll be very interesting. I'll break down this fight here in a second, but Pat, I want to let you go. We appreciate you coming on once again. Where can we find you and all that good stuff?
Well, you can find your boy P Money at Sweet Pappy Jones on Twitter and Instagram. Give me a follow. We're always here breaking down the fights, always on the social media breaking down the fights, talking a bunch of shit as we like to do. And it's always a pleasure, Jake. Wish I didn't have a heart out, but, you know, we're trying to keep the shows a little more concise these days. So this does work to that end. And always a pleasure breaking it down with you. And good to have our boy Ramsey's back on as well. Shout out to the Aunt Jimmy Show.
As we proceed to give you what you need, thank you again. And we'll probably chat with you next week, man.
Oh, you know it, brother. You have a lovely one.
Later on. So I guess that it's a little more intimate now. It's just me and you. You being the listener. Once again, our phone number is 213-457-3380. We got Ramsey's to call in earlier. If you are listening live and you want to call in or tweet in, the Twitter's at the MMA Podcast. The Skype name is the same, the MMA Podcast. Always taking calls. Once again, that number 213-457-3380. And I'll break down Cormier Gus. Man, this is a fight I give to Cormier. Like I said, Gus did well in that first minute against Rumble. But I think when it comes to chins here, I think Cormier has a very big advantage. You know, Rumble hit both of them hard in the first round, Gus and Cormier. Cormier was able to rebound. Gus got finished. Cormier is a hell of a puncher too. I mean, it's kind of crazy with Kane now out of the title picture. I feel like if Cormier gets a rematch to Jones and loses, he might move up to 265 and become champion. I mean, he's got the skill set where he really could be the heavyweight champ, especially at that size. You know, he's got a lot of advantages being the faster fighter with a lot of older plotting guys at heavyweight. But this is for the 205 title, a title that I think a lot of people agree in. I guess they shouldn't have stripped Jones. It makes sense, and I understand why they did it, but it sucks that his 8-win title streak will have to be reset, because that was maybe the craziest streak just as far as level of opponent and the way he finished them mostly all. Cormier Gus, though, I'll try and keep on topic. Man, Cormier, yeah, he doesn't have the punching power as Johnson has, but he still hits hard. And it's going to be all about, you know, Gustafson's going to try and keep it a kickboxing match, and Cormier's going to try and wrap him up, grind him out, whether that's against the cage or on the mat. And can Gus keep Cormier off of him? Gus has looked very good trying to do that against Rumble. He did it against Jon Jones. I mean, shoot, you know, did it versus a lot of guys who have tried to bring it in close. I hate to compare the Jones-Gustafson fight to the Jones-Cormier fight, because the word is Jones-Gustafson, he had a week-long training camp and didn't take it seriously at all, where Jones-Cormier, there was a lot of tension and he trained very hard. So I hate to compare those fights. And I'll also admit I am a little biased, Cormier being my favorite active fighter. I want DC to win a lot, and I think that it's going to come down to that style matchup. And there's a reason in Vegas he's minus 310. I mean, he is a beast wrestling and stand-up too. But if I'm betting this, to be honest, I think the line should be a lot closer. I think Cormier should maybe be like minus 150, because I'm telling you, Gustafsson has underrated takedown defense. If he can make it a kickboxing fight, it's his fight. And like I said, his only two losses were his only two losses since 2010, when Phil Davis subbed him out, was to Jon Jones, a very, 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 very close fight, the fight of the year in 2013, in fact, and to Rumble Johnson, where anyone can get caught by Rumble, and that was a little bit of a controversial knockout. I don't think anyone except for Johnson and Gus, and in the heat of the moment, I mean, both of them might not even really know what happened. There looked like there may have been an apparent headbutt that led to the TKO finish. Maybe no one will ever know. But going back to Cormier-Gus, I think Cormier will win, but either way this works out, I won't be shocked. And either way, I think we see a Jones rematch, and both of those storylines are so great. You have Jones, Cormier, the UFC 182 Bad Blood build-up was one of the funnest build-ups I've seen to a fight. And of course, Gustafsson with that fight with Jones. God damn, I watch that fight every 4 or 5 months, because it's just so fun. And even as a Jones hater, I'll go ahead and call myself a Jones hater. Watching it, you have nothing but respect. Looking at it, like, my God, Jones was concussed in a very bad spot, but that man, starting about 2 or 3 minutes into that fourth round and into the fifth round, roaring back. I actually scored that fight 48-48. I believe I gave the first 3 rounds a 10-9 Gus, fourth round 10-9 Jones, and I believe I scored the fifth round 10-8 Jones. Just a fun fight. And speaking of fun fights, tune in this Saturday to UFC 192, because I think it'll be very, very fun. And I believe that's all we got for you. Next week, of course, we will be back. We'll be... Oops, that's not the file I meant to open. This is the file I meant to open, people. The Jiu-Jitsu outro. This song is Jiu-Jitsu by Smoke Serpent, a band with Eddie Bravo in it. He gave us permission before the first episode to use it, and we've been using it ever since. Like I said, we'll be back next week to break down UFC 192, the week in MMA. Past UFC 192, we won't have another UFC card for a few weeks. UFC Fight Night 76, Poirier versus Duffy. We have a very fun Rothwell versus Stipe Miocic fight there on the co-main too. Who are we throwing shout-outs to? Shout-out to Front Row Brian, Tom Lawler, and the FRB show. I believe this Saturday, October 3rd, that night for UFC 192, we will be doing a filthy FRB fight party. Those are sort of tentative. We were planning on doing one with the Japan card, but that sort of fell out at the last minute. I guess we're going to try and do one for the 192 card. Myself, Front Row Brian. I don't know if Tom Lawler is going to be able to make it. Tom with a little Bambino on the way. I think he's pretty busy with obligations involved with that. We might be able to get Ben Askren, who, word on the street, we might be hearing news soon about a Ben Askren related show. I know he's going to be fighting Luis Santos in November in Singapore, get a win under his belt. And I mean, the guy, honestly, he and Fedor are in their own class as far as the best fighters of all time who have never fought in the UFC. Askren is a beast. So we might be able to get Askren on the fight party, me, FRB, maybe Ramses, who knows. Stay tuned for that. Follow Front Row Brian and the Filthy FRB show on Twitter. Who else are we throwing the shout-outs to? I already gave shouts out to my boys early in the show. C. Lowenstein, Ross Finkelstein, yeah, the truth, Alan Hamilton, Hero, Shinwoo. Shout out to the Mims, our boy Kevin Black. AMS, shout out to AMS _ Darkside, the official talent coordinator of the Word on the Street. Shout out to our boy Melee Mitten, of course, him. Gavin Frost, my boy. We chilled and got wings before that glory in Denver. Of course, a shout out to my boy Gavin Frost on Twitter at GavinSteele361. Who else are we throwing shouts out to? The MMA enthusiast, MMA Adam Martin. A journalist for the Toronto Star and always bringing hot takes, good takes on MMA. Our boy Josh Sanchez, JN Sanchez, met him on that Glory Press row, working as editor-in-chief at Campus Sports, doing it big there in Atlanta, Georgia. Love me some Josh Sanchez. And of course, our boy Diz. Dude, Diz, shout out to you. If you're not following Talk MMA, it really is one of the best. One of the best MMA follows if you're on the Twitters. Talk MMA, Front Row Brian. I mean, he's up there bringing you the hot takes, the breaking news. Of course, our boy P Money, who was on tonight at Sweet Pappy Jones, and our boy Mystery Meds. He's at Mystery Deja, and he does the outro. So without further ado, I'll play that outro. I appreciate the hell out of you tuning in. We love you. That's the whole reason we keep doing it, is all the positive feedback. Try and do a Nate Corey interview soon, a Joe Schilling interview soon. Been talking to both of those guys, so keep your ear to the ground for that. I love the fuck out of each and every person who listened to this show, and we'll see you next week. We go!
Jake, tune into the MMA Podcast every Tuesday night.
Got the wild style, always been a foul child. Relax, sucker, I be the coming like Noah.
The MMA Podcast, Jake is the host. And since Ramsey's been in a wheelchair, the Aunt Jimmy Show has been on a roll. I wanna say Jon Jones is a host, so I think that I'll pick up the phone and dial 213-457-3380. We got hot takes on the stove. You get blood on your clothes if you're sitting in the front row. I throw on my gi and then I lace the hoops. I'll have Yao lying down cause he ain't the truth. And if Alan wasn't a cop, I'd mention you. And shout out to Ross Finkelstein the Jew. Cause according to you, you're an MMA guru. Approved Bisbing lost his hands, Count Dooku. If you're a fancy boy, you get a 2-minute slot. Mystery wants a title shot. So listen to the MMA Podcast. Throw a high kick, but I block that. Call me Diaz, screaming George, where you at? I want the strap. But you know that I'll never tap. So listen to the MMA Podcast. Throw a high kick, but I block that. Call me Diaz, screaming George, where you at? I want the strap. And you know that I won't tap. Mystery. The MMA Podcast. Most of us just live and breathe this fighting shit. Shout out to Jake. Shout out to Jake.